All right, our next speaker is Candice Bartlett from the Nature Conservation Council. Candice is a conservation officer here at NCC and is also the science communications officer at the Biodiversity Council, so working across two roles there. Candice is reporting back from some recent site visits, some recent site visits that she undertook across the Central West and Western New South Wales. And her background is in ecological science and also strategic advocacy campaigns. Candice has lived and worked across Northwest New South Wales for over a decade, and including doing some work with landholders on koala conservation. Great to have you here, Candice. Over to you.
Introduction. So, to start, I wanted to quickly pick up on something that David touched on. So, the importance of language we use in our laws and how that shapes the way people think and behave. When we give native plants and natural processes the wrong name, so calling them invasive, that really creates the social license to destroy them and can result in the loss of critical habitat. And a case study that I think really highlights that is a major prosecuted case of land clearing that occurred earlier this year, where landowners had illegally cleared more than 119,000 hollow bearing trees. So, and we know that these take hundreds of years to form an important breeding and nesting habitat for wildlife. So, during the court processes, it was revealed that the landowner was trying to justify saying that they had a permit to clear invasive native species. And it's true, all the trees they cleared on that list are occurring on that New South Wales government's hit list, but the laws definitely don't allow the clearing of that scale of mature trees. And I think this case really highlights the huge risks of INS label that can be misused or misunderstood and lead to the loss of critical habitat. And so if you've been wondering what species do occur on the government's native species hit list, it's these 45 species here. Some names you might be familiar with are river red gums, coolabah trees, lots of acacias and wattles as well. Next slide. So I want to hone in on what land clearing actually looks like on the ground. So for me, land clearing has been this huge policy, sort of abstract discussion for so long. You know, this many thousands of hectares is cleared, and these are the policies that are enabling it. But at NCC, we really want to ask that question: what does land clearing actually look like in some of these clearing hotspots under the legislation enabling it? Just to inform our advocacy around the on-ground reality. So we turn to the stats. One, most tree clearing occurs for agriculture. Two, most clearing occurs in the western part of the state, as you can see on that map on the left there. And three, most clearing is occurring under this mysterious code called INS. So we've been out in the field visiting sites that are marked on that map on the right there. In my work, there are three types of clearing that I've generally come across. One is this boundary clearing on the left. We had some really loose codes introduced after the bushfires, allowing for clearing for fire breaks on private property. But as you can see, again, there's too many loopholes, and it's allowing remnant vegetation corridors across a denuded landscape to be cleared. The other type of clearing that I come across is paddock tree clearing. So again, clearing those last trees in a largely denuded landscape, and the laws do permit that. And then general clearing, where you've got large patches of land being cleared. And it's that last type of clearing that I'd like to talk about now. And I want to share with you four different sites we've visited that have all been cleared under those INS permissions, but I think will illustrate something quite different at each site. So this is site one. That yellow boundary up there, that's 50 hectares cleared. It looks like it's adjacent to lots of trees, and that's because the landowner has cleared right up to a protected state conservation area. And as you can see from that broader satellite image, it's actually in a broader cropping landscape, and that property is a registered cropping corporation. So they've removed large swathes of vegetation as much as they can up into that boundary. These are some pictures of the adjacent woodland. So presumably lots of those shared habitat values are there with what's been cleared. It is koala habitat, as well as lots of habitat for other threatened species like the grey-crowned warbler there. And the species that are being cleared are like eucalyptus populnea and our native cypress pines. And this is what that clearing looks like on the ground. So this is what we call stick raking. So if you can see that attachment on the front of that dozer, and as you can see, yep, so ground's been raked back and forth, and you've destroyed the ground cover, any understory, and the top layers. So it's not a really gentle approach on the landscape, and that landscape's been reduced to 20 trees per hectare, so quite low density. This is the second site I wanted to share, and it's definitely one of the most extensive sites we have observed. So that property is 7,000 hectares and 90% of it was mapped as INS. But when you look at the satellite imagery, you can see as you progress from west to east, it's actually more of an open woodland to dense woodland, like that sort of natural makeup you'd see across the landscape. And over time, so the oldest landscape imagery we can access is back in 1985, so 40 years ago. And you can see that over time, those areas marked are around 5,000 hectares have cleared, and they've been maintained as open and cultivated country for farming use, resulting in that permanent change in land use. And the habitat type cleared there again is our native eucalypt woodlands, and again mapped as INS. And if you wonder what that one looks like on the ground, so again, this was just one of the most staggering and perhaps a more rarer case where they have cleared everything across the center of that property. You've got this vegetation boundary, but thousands of hectares cleared and nothing left. This is the third site I wanted to share. Oops, sorry, just go back. The third site, this is the beautiful mulga woodlands that are typical of our red dirt country in Western New South Wales. I think this photo on the right's really stark contrast because it shows you that the landscape was cleared, did have that diversity across it of the smaller shrubs and larger trees, and it's been cleared. It was part of 2,000 hectares that was cleared on that property. And when you look at species records, it was home to species like the major Mitchell cockatoo, which is a threatened species, and lots of our other animals that you'd find in inland ecosystems. And this is the last site I want to share. So I find this site also quite interesting and demonstrates something different. So this site was first cleared in 2017. Over 1,000 hectares was cleared. But if you look long enough at that vegetation and the photo, you can sort of see, oh, well, maybe that vegetation on the edges looks a bit younger, and your interpretations would be correct. So the site was first cleared in 2017, as mentioned. And at that stage, the veg was at least 40 years old, so as far back as we can go in the satellite images. And then they've started to re-clear that more recently, and that's what we've visited. And that landscape was a mallee shrubby woodland with eucalypts like our coolabah trees and populnea trees. And I think this case study again is very interesting because when you map it from above, it's less than 1 tree per hectare. So again, that's very significant removal of older growth trees, and it is part of a broader cultivated property if we're sort of speculating what that land might be permanently converted to in the future.
Just one more minute. Thanks, Candice.
Thanks. The last thing I wanted to share is why we're so concerned about this so-called INS clearing. So not only does it make up the largest proportion of clearing currently, but more than 3.2 million hectares have been approved for clearing that are yet to be cleared, and they're still under active clearing approvals, not only under the old property vegetation plans, so legacy approvals that are still valid, and also the current local land services codes. So we're really concerned that this remains a huge risk to biodiversity if those approvals were to be activated across the landscape.